MSNBC, the leader in cable news.
U.S. troops prepare to strike al-Qaeda again, this time in the Philippines. A computer hard drive found in Afghanistan with information about new plots against America. And Friday's baggage screening deadlines. Will our luggage finally be checked for bombs? I'm Chris Matthews. Let's play hardball. Here's what's happening tonight. Attorney General John Ashcroft says that shoe bomber Richard Reed was trained by al-Qaeda and charges him with attempting to blow up that Paris to Miami airplane. An al-Qaeda computer hard drive seized in Afghanistan reveals new details about possible terror plots against the U.S.-Canadian border. U.S. troops remain in hot pursuit of al-Qaeda, with special forces now on the ground in the Philippines. The chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee says it may be time to pull out all our forces from Saudi Arabia. And Secretary of State Colin Powell lands in Pakistan. Can he prevent a nuclear war? And Senator Ted Kennedy forces a showdown with the president, calling for a halt to Bush's tax cuts. Those stories, plus Mary Schiavo on Friday's deadline for the airlines to screen all checked baggage. The latest on Enron, could top executives be going to jail? And Vanity Fair's Christopher Hitchens. We begin with the latest on shoe bomber Richard Reed and this report from NBC Justice correspondent Pete Williams.
A federal grand jury today accused Reed of receiving training from an al-Qaeda terrorist camp and then trying to kill a plane load of people with explosives hidden in his shoes. Until today, Reed had been charged only with interfering with the flight crew members who spotted him trying to ignite the shoe bombs on an American Airlines flight from Paris bound for Miami 3 days before Christmas.
Reed's indictment alerts us to a clear, unmistakable threat that al-Qaeda could attack the United States again.
Among other charges, the grand jury accuses Reed of attempting to use a weapon of mass destruction, using a dangerous weapon against the flight crew, and attempting to destroy an airplane. All carry a maximum sentence of life in prison. The Attorney General and the FBI Director say the quick action by the flight crew proves that the government's frequent threat warnings paid off.
An observant and responsible public is as much a partner to effective law enforcement as any other activity we in law enforcement undertake.
Meantime, today, U.S. law enforcement officials say they're studying the contents of these computers apparently left behind in Afghanistan by al-Qaeda members as U.S. forces closed in hopes that the contents might shed new light on what Reed was up to. Wall Street Journal reporters bought the computers in Afghanistan and spent weeks decoding and translating the thousands of files they contained. They found one document detailing the travels of an al-Qaeda operative called Brother Abdul Rauf, whose apparent mission was to scout potential terrorist targets in Israel and Egypt. The Journal reporters say that operative's movements appear to match those of Richard Reed, right down to the issuing of replacement passports in the same cities.
Well, there's a fairly sort of compelling circumstantial evidence that this is the same person.
The computer material has been turned over to federal investigators who say it likely does describe Richard Reed, but they say they've found nothing definite yet to prove it. Pete Williams, NBC News at the Justice Department.
Not only does that computer hard drive contain information that may describe Reed, it reveals plans for possible future attacks here in America. Earlier, foreign editor John Bussey described the contents of the disk to MSNBC's Greg Jarrett.
The file that we were particularly looking at has lots of back and forth between headquarters and this scout. And the scout is moving, as you say, through the Mideast, and he's saying, look, you know, we could target the Wailing Wall. Security doesn't seem to be good enough. Buses in Israel, trains. He suggested at one point the United Nations building. Some of the correspondents did. The United Nations building in New York. Bars along the border with Canada where U.S. servicemen go in the evening. So there are a lot of mentions of various targets. And the very interesting thing here is that the itinerary of this scout, who uses an alias in the correspondence and the back and forth communications in the computer, mirrors exactly that of Richard Reed. Does not name Richard Reed, but the U.S. Government has also looked at the files. They have copies of all this, and they say, geez, it looks pretty interesting and almost conclusive that this guy was Richard Reed. The very interesting thing also in that story that he talks about on that trip into Israel was that security sat next to him. He is seated on the plane. the people next to him are moved, and 2 new people are put into the seats next to him. And we know that Richard Reed traveled to Israel, and El Al, the security at El Al, moved a sky marshal right next to him because they were suspicious of him, and they checked his shoes for bombs, etc. So that was one more bit of evidence that points to the fact that it probably was Richard Reed that was doing the scouting. At least it's almost conclusive that it was.
That was the Wall Street Journal's foreign editor, John Bussey. Now to the war effort overseas and a new front in the war on terror. U.S. Special Forces are now on the ground in the Philippines, working with the Philippine Army to hunt down Islamic extremists connected with al-Qaeda. Abu Sayyaf is a guerrilla group that already holds 2 American missionaries hostage. Bill Arkin is an NBC News military analyst. We're going into the Philippines. It's the next stop on the magical mystery tour of anti-terrorism. What do you make of that decision to put our troops in there? 600-some troops right now?
I don't make much, Chris, but I think that it's interesting that we're refocusing our efforts on Asia and not on the Middle East. We've heard over the last week Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, Philippines, far more than we've heard about Yemen, Somalia, or Sudan. I think that that really shows you the focus of the U.S. military. There's a worldwide operations plan now. It's called the World Op Plan, and it's looking at countries A, B, and C. Those countries have not been named yet, but we're putting our forces in place. Things are being moved around. I think the special forces on the ground in the Philippines are helping out a very competent military, but I think the danger of U.S. forces in the Philippines is that this is a guerrilla war that's been going on forever.
Do we stand the risk, I hate to go back to an old canard, but do we stand the risk of getting involved in a Vietnam situation, which is basically a civil war, a rebel group that doesn't want to be under the control of Manila, and we're taking sides?
I think
is that a danger?
I really don't think it's a danger because I don't think that's what the Bush administration is up to. I think the fact that there are lots of special forces on the ground now makes it news today, and also because people are looking, what is that phase 2 of this operation going to be? Is it going to be an Afghanistan scale operation? Right. I don't think so.
Let me be blunt. I don't really care what happens in the Philippines. I care about what happens here in the United States. Are we stamping out al-Qaeda, the threat to us here, by going into the Philippines?
Absolutely not, Chris. I mean, I think it's a real danger that we go after anything that rhymes with al-Qaeda, and I think the Philippines is a bit of that. The tough nuts to crack, which are going to be Malaysia, Singapore, Somalia, Yemen, and of course the rest of the Gulf states, you know, we're reluctant to go into in a big way. And so the Philippines, they're our friends. We can go in there. We can help the Philippine Army out.
That's a start.
Right. We can help.
We aren't going to get invited into Yemen.
No, you know what, Chris? We are going to get invited to Yemen.
But isn't the Yemenese president claiming there is no al-Qaeda operation in this country?
That's baloney. And you know,
but it is baloney.
We don't read about it very much, but in fact the Yemenis...
Maybe the president is baloney in Yemen. We got to live with the fact. We don't like these characters.
Yeah, but you know, in Yemen, and I would just point out, there's a lot we don't see. I think there's a lot of law enforcement, intelligence, covert operations going on in places like Yemen where we're assisting the local forces to do something where we're putting a lot of pressure on them, Chris. I think in the Philippines it's a more overt effort, but we have to remind ourselves this is a Marxist guerrilla war that's been going on for over 10 years now.
I'd like to know when the Philippines weren't at war.
Well, in the island area that we're talking about, it goes back all the way to the 1940s. Yeah. But I think that what the Philippines represents to me, what I hear from my Pentagon sources, is that there's a greater and greater focus on Asia, that there was a real stunner, I think, to the Pentagon recently, that Singapore could have been a place where al-Qaeda was hiding out. Singapore is a kind of really controlled
We're going
country.
back to being what we've always been in our good days, a Pacific power, and I'm very happy about that anyway. Thank you, Bill Arkin. Now to another hot spot in the Mideast. The chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee, Carl Levin, he's from Michigan, is saying we should consider withdrawing all our troops from Saudi Arabia because the Saudis are, in his words, not fully cooperating in the war against terrorism. Here's what he had to say, the senator from Michigan, quote, they act as though somehow or another they're doing us a favor, and I think the war against terrorism has got to be fought by countries who really realize that it's in everybody's interest to go after terrorism. I think we may be able to find a place where we are much more welcome openly, a place which has not been or has not seen significant resources flowing to support some really extreme fanatic views. He's obviously talking about Saudi Arabia. Amin Tarzai with the Monterey Institute. Amin, thank you for joining us from California, I assume. What do you make of this decision all of a sudden now from the chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee to say, let's think about getting out of Saudi Arabia, a country we've been allied with for decades?
Good afternoon. It's interesting. I think the reason I see this as happening is more to do with the issue of Colonel McSally, as you know, the fighter, U.S. Air Force pilot who is suing the Pentagon. And I don't think, in my view at least, it is wise at this point to bring in the issue of the base closure. We have basically one major base 50 miles south of Riyadh, the Prince Sultan Air Force Base. and we have a smaller base in Riyadh which basically trains the Saudi National Guard. Those are not for Saudi protection. They do not see them as protection for Saudi Arabia. The only thing the Saudi government sees as protection from the U.S. given to them is the Patriot anti-missile batteries. So,
well, let me ask you this. You've raised, Mr. Tarzai, you've raised the issue that an American servicewoman, a high-ranking officer, a pilot, has complained about the fact that it's U.S. policy whenever a woman serving in the U.S. Armed Services who is posted to Saudi Arabia, particularly the Riyadh area, those women are required to walk around with very heavy overclothing to match the local mores. Do you think that's the reason why Senator Levin has taken action now? It's politics, it's gender politics at home?
There has been a downsizing of and worsening of relations between Saudi Arabia and the United States. As you well know,
sure.
15 of the 19 people in the planes were Saudis. We have had, when Ashcroft put the report of that 300 names initially in September, there were quite a few Saudis, which was an eye-opener, not only for us here, but also, I'm sure, for the Saudi government. However, the timing of this particular issue, I think, is more related to the Colonel McSally's suing of the Pentagon. Let us not forget that this is not Saudi policy that requires Western women to wear their abaya. It is a policy of the United States government, specifically the Pentagon, and it's also a policy that was initiated by the base itself. It's not an overall Pentagon policy. It was initiated there as, because these servicemen and women were seen as ambassadors of the U.S. and they were taught to be in a place where it's sensitive and considered to be a holy land for the Muslims. So the commander of that particular base initiated the policy. So
you don't think the United States has been, you're saying the United States is kowtowing, it's being a little too polite to the Saudis, that we could get away with letting our women officers dress like they do at home?
Well, not exactly like home, but at least modestly. When you look at the State Department, for example, people who work in our embassy in Riyadh or the consulates, they do not wear anything like the Saudis wear. They do not wear miniskirts, but they wear basically what is called modestly dressed. So this is a base policy. And the reason is because there's much to go, you have to understand Al-Qaeda and specifically Bin Laden's first grievance against the U.S. was the presence of Americans in Saudi Arabia.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Tarzai. Now to Pakistan, where the showdown with India continues. Secretary of State Colin Powell landed in Islamabad today, the start of his mission to prevent a war. NBC News Chief Foreign Affairs Correspondent Andrea Mitchell has this report.
Colin Powell on a mission to avert another war. This time between India and Pakistan, both armed with nuclear weapons.
We need a campaign against terrorism, not a campaign with these two countries fighting one another.
It is almost mission impossible. Today, just as he arrives in the region, India raises the stakes. Hints that its submarines are already armed with nuclear warheads, a threat Pakistan cannot match.
The Navy is fully stood to, its powder is dry, and we are ready.
And Pakistan warns today that even a small incident can spark a chain of events that could be disastrous. That's exactly why Powell is here.
We want to find ways to de-escalate militarily, de-escalate some of the political and diplomatic steps that have been taken in recent weeks.
What will he propose? When he arrives in India tomorrow night, he will ask India to reverse its decisions to close the border and lift restrictions on Pakistani flights over its territory. If these first steps work, then possibly a troop pullback. But here is the problem Powell faces. India still wants satisfaction for a suicide bomb attack on its parliament. India claims staged by Pakistani terrorists. Powell, who has been working both sides hard with almost daily phone calls, got a major concession last week from Pakistan's President Musharraf. On Saturday, he declared war on his country's terrorists.
Pakistan will not allow its territory to be used for any terrorist activity anywhere in the world.
As of tonight, he's arrested almost 2,000 militants, outlawed radical Islamic groups, cracked down on religious schools that recruit young boys into the terrorist ranks. But it is a high-risk strategy. Pakistan's leader faces challenges from Taliban supporters in his own government. To help prop him up, tonight Powell invited Musharraf to visit President Bush for the first time in Washington. But that gesture will surely infuriate India, creating even more challenges when Powell lands there tomorrow night. Andrea Mitchell, NBC News, Islamabad.
Now to a new political fight here at home. Senator Ted Kennedy co-sponsored President Bush's education bill, But this morning they returned to their usual ideological corners, left and right. Kennedy forced a showdown with Bush on one of his core issues, tax cuts.
Whatever the merits or demerits of the last year's tax bill, it was enacted in what now seems a very different and distant time. Today, for the sake of our country, we must transcend the old boundaries of debate. We must think anew and act responsibly. We can and should postpone a portion of the future tax cuts that overwhelmingly benefit the wealthiest taxpayers.
President Bush had this reaction.
And then those who want to revoke the tax cut, basically raise taxes, are those who just don't share my view. I think raising taxes in the midst of a recession is wrong economic policy. It'd be a huge mistake. It's bad for American workers. It would hurt when it comes to creating jobs. And so I strongly disagree with those who want to raise taxes here in Washington, D.C.
It's a great, healthy American debate, taxes. Tomorrow, Senator Kennedy will respond to President Bush right here on Hardball. That's what's happening tonight. Now, here's my Hardball take on the headlines tonight. So it turns out that that guy on the Paris to Miami flight just before Christmas was not just some nut or copycat. He was a trained terrorist working for Al-Qaeda, the people who blew up the World Trade Center. His mission? Blow up another American plane. Who saved that plane? A flight attendant and a bunch of American passengers who had the moxie to see the danger and the guts to move into action. Tom Ridge, the Homeland Security boss, was right when he said on Hardball that the first and last line of defense, especially up in the air, against terrorism is you and me. I'll be back in a moment with Al-Qaeda expert Michael Griffin and what we're learning about Osama bin Laden's network and his plans to strike again here in the U.S. You're watching Hardball.
Hardball is brought to you in part by H&R Block. Just plain smart.
No time left for you. On my way to better things. I've got no time.
Why do 63% of Americans think financial institutions aren't interested in helping them? Maybe because they aren't. With H&R Block Financial Advisors, now everyone can have access to smart financial advice. You get investments, financial services, and retirement planning, all on your terms.
How do you invest to help secure your retirement? You start with your dreams. And Edward Jones.
My life, my world, it all begins with a dream.
Edward Jones.
The arm's still strong, but sometimes the pain's even stronger. So I grab control with Advil. Not Tylenol, not Aleve. Nothing's proven stronger or lasts longer than Advil.
You have the strength to get rid of pain. Take control. Take Advil.
Are you getting your market information a little late? Daytech. Built to trade.
It's time you expected more from an insurance company. So call Progressive Auto Insurance, and we can give you our low price, plus the rates for up to 3 leading competitors. And that could save you hundreds.
We want you to save money, even if it's not with us.
It's time you expected an easier way to buy car insurance. Because at Progressive.com, you can get a quote and buy a policy instantly. In fact, our website is so fast and easy to use, it's been rated #1 4 times in a row. It's time you expected faster claim service. At Progressive, our immediate response vehicles can come right to you. They're like a claims office on wheels.
We make getting back on the road fast and easy.
Visit Progressive.com or call 1-800-PROGRESSIVE today for fast, friendly service 24 hours a day. We want you to save money, even if it's not with us.
Okay, maybe we're not changing the world, but we are changing the way people buy car insurance.
You could start saving now. Call 1-800-PROGRESSIVE or visit Progressive.com. Progressive, not what you'd expect from an insurance company.
What does it take to be the leader? You have to be there. Ashley Banfield. Wherever the story goes, she's there. One more reason MSNBC is the leader in cable news. Stay right here with MSNBC, the leader in cable news.
More now on that al-Qaeda hard drive found in Afghanistan. The Wall Street Journal reports that the hard drive disk also contains information about another plot against the U.S. Quote, a separate undated document stored on the Kabul desktop computer outlines a planned scouting trip to the U.S.-Canadian border by someone he calls Abu Bakr al-Albani. A summary of his tasks includes scoping out nightclubs frequented by U.S. servicemen. Michael Griffin is author of Reaping the Whirlwind. He joins us from London. Thank you, Michael, for staying up so late. But this is one fascinating story. Here we are picking up a computer hard drive in Kabul. Our service people picked it up. That shows that they had a guy up and checking around the American-Canadian border looking for nightclubs to blow up because GIs hang out there. This is getting close to home here.
Well, certainly it's getting very close to home, and as you know, there's been a very strong al-Qaeda presence in Canada since long before 1999 when the plot to blow up LA International Airport was uncovered just in time in the millennium year.
Well, let me talk to you there. There's also a scouting report believed to be written by the shoe bomber. That's the guy who had the interesting shoes on that Paris to Miami flight, Richard Reed. The report describes a trip to Israel and reads, quote, he walked for about 5 minutes and he arrived at the city of Jaffa, that's in Israel, to photograph some mosque ruins as well as the ruins of some churches so that the film would not begin with the photographs of the big buildings or the commercial center. He returned to Tel Aviv and he photographed the big buildings and he inserted among the photographs of the beach and such. So he's covering up a scouting report for apparently a terrorist raid with all this local color.
Well, it's very interesting, and the Wall Street Journal is very respected, but at the same time, Richard Reed does not come across as a convincing tracker and spy. He actually comes across as somebody who has serious mental health problems. And if you look at most of the hijackers involved in September the 11th, you're talking about very, very low-profile people, polite, respectable. They're not wildcats like Reed. I would take this with a little bit of salt.
You don't think Reed was a trained terrorist by al-Qaeda?
He doesn't strike me as being reliable enough to be entrusted with a job like that.
Let me ask you about what this tells us about this whole operation. One of the good things about invading Afghanistan and taking it over is we're getting all this stuff, and a lot of this stuff has to do with either current or future operations or intelligence and casing, basically, of the joint worldwide. What do you think it tells us about the operations and how they go about doing what they do, al-Qaeda?
I don't really think there is a specific al-Qaeda formula for doing things. What I seem to find as I'm working through this material is, on the one hand, there are people like Abdul Rassam in Canada, who is responsible for trying to blow up LA Airport, who basically are living on the very, very close to petty crime. They're sociopaths to some extent, and they're picked up. Whereas you get people like Mohammed Atta, who are incredibly self-controlled, very disciplined, almost like missiles going toward their target. And Richard Reed seems to belong to that other group, the one of Rassam, and many of the groups of it which have been uncovered in Europe. Disconsolate, misguided people rather than targeted individuals like the ones involved in the New York and Washington attacks in September.
You know, you make it
11th.
sound, I know it's not to be flippant, but it sounds like one of these sort of hamburger chains where you have somebody with a big name. I'm not going to use their name because they'll get mad at me, but some well-known hamburger joint chain, and they basically say to any local entrepreneur, you want to set up one of these hamburger joints, we'll back you, we'll set some standards, we'll finance it, you run it. Is that the way it operates, al-Qaeda?
I think there really is this franchise element about it. I think when al-Qaeda was setting itself up, say mid-1990s, really before it began to have any serious impact upon the globe or the United States, I think there was this feeling that if you kind of got in there first, you would become the local al-Qaeda.
Let's talk about
you would serve whatever kind of cheeseburger you wanted.
Right. Well, that seems to be the case here, because you've got this guy with the crazy shoes, and you've got all the kinds of operations going on that are a hell of a lot more serious, like September 11th. What do you think we've been able to disrupt it, this whole operation, over this franchising operation, as we've described it, over in Afghanistan, worldwide?
You know, I'm very afraid that this is not the case. I don't think it's been disrupted. There has been a lot of speculation. Bin Laden, in fact, handed over to a man called Abu Zaderi, I believe, who had actually arranged for Mohammed Atta and a number of other people to come to Peshawar and then to go into Afghanistan. So there is this indication that there is a second generation of al-Qaeda still in existence, still abroad. I'm quite afraid that, you know, we're pretending it doesn't exist. The other thing I'd like to say, Chris, really is that you've got to remember that old conjurer's trick. If you keep the audience busy looking at what you're doing with your right hand. They can't tell what you're doing with your left hand. And all of this business about Reed and Reed's secret mission to track or to scout for a new operation suggests that really U.S. intelligence is trying to withdraw attention from the public from the fact that Osama bin Laden may have escaped overseas.
You think it's a feint, or it's a cover-up of a failure?
I'm more inclined to think it's a feint. I mean, Reed doesn't look like anybody's winner. He looks like a sad man.
Let's go back and look at some of the information on that hard drive, because it's something that's been picked up in Kabul by our people, and it tells us how this operation works, and everybody watching can be a detective figuring out what this all means. Here's one of the scouting reports from Israel. There are 3 stops for the train at 3 Tel Aviv stations. It arrived at 10 in the evening, and there is an excellent opportunity to strike the train or the train station, especially on a Saturday. That's obviously Shabbat, the Sabbath, when it's closed, Sabbath evening when it's crowded, of course, at the end of the Sabbath. If the striker is unable to enter the train station without being searched, it is then possible to strike the reception area and the farewell area. It's a place that is entered without a search and has in it not less than 100 people when the train arrives. Perfect opportunity to throw a pipe bomb or something like that into an Israeli crowd. Clearly a casing operation. What do you make of
I mean, it does sound good. It doesn't sound like an Al-Qaeda operation. It sounds more like a Hezbollah or a Hamas operation, which might kind of lead you to think that perhaps there was some convergence between Hamas, Hezbollah, and Al-Qaeda. This is not something that Al-Qaeda would do. I mean, think back.
Sure, it doesn't. It's not on the same magnitude.
They have never thought about Israel.
Yeah.
It's not been their area. It's been the United States.
Isn't that interesting that the fact is
that abroad or at home?
Yeah, it sounds to me like they're underwriting the anti-Israeli crowd, Hezbollah or Hamas.
More likely.
That stuff.
Yeah.
Well, we're learning every day.
This doesn't sound like an Al-Qaeda operation. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you very much for joining us, and thanks for staying up late. I know it's the wrong time in London to be thinking so hard, but thank you for doing so. Up next, will the airlines be able to inspect every checked bag for explosives by Friday, the deadline? We'll ask Mary Schiavo. Plus, in the fall of the Enron debacle, should Enron's executives go to jail? And later, Vanity Fair's Christopher Hitchens is coming here. You're watching Hardball.
We were in the islands, exploring the only volcano in the world you can bike from top to bottom. It was a place we found on Travelocity. We experienced what it was like to spend a day in the clouds.
Great trips stay with you forever. On Travelocity, we'll show you a calendar of choices for the price you want. Because a great fare isn't great if it's not available when you are. Travelocity. Go virtually anywhere.
Use MSN to get online. Use it to plan a fishing trip. Use it to buy a graphite fishing rod. And hand-tied flies. And searching for basic fishing techniques might be really useful too. Want an internet service you can really use? MSN from Microsoft is the great alternative to AOL. MSN, more useful every day.
We understand. Dreams do not come with expiration dates. Emergencies? Never check your calendar. And life does not always stick to the game plan. We're Household, and we understand the hopes and financial needs of everyday people. That's why for nearly 125 years, we've specialized in loans, credit, and understanding. Household, helping everyday people, every day.
The man is a legend. He is skill, grace, finesse. And at these Olympic Winter Games, one thing that shouldn't hold him back is the pain, inflammation, and stiffness of osteoarthritis. With just one Celebrex, he gets powerful 24-hour relief from these 3 symptoms. Because he didn't come here to disappoint this crowd. Celebrex should not be taken if you've had aspirin-sensitive asthma or allergic reactions to aspirin or other arthritis medicines or certain drugs called sulfonamides. In rare cases, serious stomach problems such as bleeding can occur without warning. Tell your doctor if you have kidney or liver problems.
I've never seen ice since.
Celebrate! Ask your doctor about Celebrex, official supporter of the 2002 U.S. Olympic team.
Working hard or working out, nutrition is important. With Centrum or Centrum Silver, you benefit from what science discovers about how the right multivitamins help unlock energy and strengthen immunity. Centrum and Centrum Silver, always complete from A to Zinc.
There are many good reasons to get a home security system from ADT.
We're home. This is where we live.
Some smaller than others. So it's no surprise that more Americans choose ADT to help protect their homes than any other company. We're always there, with the most sophisticated technology and skilled professionals, helping to keep you safe from burglary, fire, flood, even carbon monoxide. ADT blankets your home with an invisible wall of protection. And now you can get ADT installed from just $99. Call 800-ADT-ASAP or an ADT authorized dealer. You could also save up to 20% off your basic homeowner's insurance. At ADT, we give you more than a security system. We give you a feeling of security, no matter what. Daddy's got you. Call now and get ADT installed from just $99, plus up to 20% off your basic homeowner's insurance. ADT, always there.
Welcome back to Hardball. This half hour we'll ask whether Enron's executives should go to jail. Plus, Vanity Fair's Christopher Hitchens is going to be here. I love that guy. But first, airlines have until Friday to meet a congressionally mandated deadline to screen every piece of checked luggage for bombs. NBC's Robert Hager has this report.
Today, the government vows to meet the new airline security law's deadline of this Friday for screening all checked luggage at airports nationwide. 2 months ago, Transportation Secretary Norman Mineta said it couldn't be done, but today he says it can and will.
We will do everything humanly possible to keep these promises.
But security experts say there are not nearly enough people, enough bomb-sniffing dogs, or enough explosive detection machines to really screen more than a small fraction of the 4 million bags checked each day. So how can they say they'll meet the deadline? Only because the law permits what some call a huge loophole. Until next year, it allows airlines to say they've screened bags if instead they simply do what's called bag matching, ensuring that every bag checked belongs to someone who actually boards the same flight. It's based on a theory that no one would plant a bomb aboard the same flight they're flying. But critics say that's now nonsense.
Bag matching doesn't make complete sense since 9/11, since we now face the threat of suicide terrorists.
And airlines will only be required to bag match for a passenger's first flight, meaning that for connecting flights, a potentially lethal checked bag could slip aboard, even if the passenger it belongs to doesn't. Is that really screening?
They should just honestly admit that they haven't met the deadline and talk about what deadline they can meet.
But today, airlines and the government say this is all they can realistically do for now.
We anticipate that it's going to be a pretty smooth startup.
But will require some sacrifices. Delta says come Friday, it will no longer take checked bags closer than a half hour to push back. United warns no more switching flights at the last minute. But true 100% screening will not be required until the next deadline, the end of this year, when the law says every checked bag will actually have to go through an explosive detection device. Robert Hager, NBC News, Washington.
Well, Mary Schiavo is an aviation disaster attorney. She's author of the book Flying Blind, Flying Safe. She also served as Inspector General for the Department of Transportation. Let's nail this down right now, Mary. Are they going to check every bag or just do this matching deal?
No, they're not going to check every bag. They're saying they're meeting the mandate because they've changed the definition. And by the way, they're not matching every bag. They're matching the bags on the initiating flight. So like in Pan Am 103, where the bombers got off en route, that segment won't be matched. So once
you know, we're in real trouble here because I just read a wire report this afternoon, Mary, that said they're going to check it either with dogs or with sniffing equipment or by hand. And it says nothing about matching. It says that the latest story from the Department of Transportation is they're going to actually do what the law says they have to do. No change in definition. Where did you get this thing that they've changed the definition?